Basically, what I wanted to focus on, and I don't know if you all can see me and the screen or if you can just see me, but what I wanted to talk about was the fact that, because of our non-Indigenous diets, our colonized diets, we take a lot of food into our bodies that actually causes harm, that actually makes us ill. And so I wanted to talk about really easy ways we can incorporate safe, delicious, and effective medicine into our lives every day. So when you hear the word medicine, maybe you get intimidated and you're like, oh, I don't know. What if that's gonna, conflict with my blood pressure medication? But all of the herbs that I'm talking about today and all of the ones that are in the seasoning blend that Tess put together and put in the broth that you might have tried, they're all safe, and they're all probably things that you guys recognize and even think of as food. And almost all of them are available at your local grocery store, almost all of them. And if they're not, I guarantee they're all around Grand Portage in that area on the North Shore. And I have harvested a lot of these medicines, or what I like to call edible medicines, right up there for people. So the way that we really like to incorporate good medicine into our diet is just by making it a constant part of our life every day, putting it into soups, putting it into broth. We even put this blend and these blends that I'm going to talk about today into things like pasta sauce. Like if we're making spaghetti, we put them into really like burgers. We sprinkle them on burgers. If my husband's going to grill burgers, we do this all the time. These blends make the food taste great, and they just constantly give us good herbs that are going to be really good for us as well. So I'll talk more about that. And if you have a question, you don't have to wait till the end of my talk. Tess said that there's a mic on every table. So if you want to press the mic and unmute yourself and just say, hey, Linda, I have a question, that's totally fine. Please feel free to do that. Okay. Otherwise, you can, maybe raise your hand and let Tess know, and she can unmute and let me know whatever question you all have. Okay. So actually, I'm going to start here. What we call medicine soup in our family is a soup that we think of in 3 layers. Okay. So if we're talking about soup, we talk about soup in our family in 3 layers. And if you look at that photo on the right-hand side, that collage of photos, that's all photos that were taken by us of food that we eat all the time. And the reason I put that in there is not to brag at all, but it's just so that you guys know. I feel like often when I go to workshops and talks that actually, like I went to a talk last month. I went to a workshop, and it was a lady who was talking about staying healthy and eating healthy. And I saw her at McDonald's, and that's not a problem. It's not a problem that I saw her at McDonald's, but I thought it was really interesting that she was saying that, she never puts that stuff in her body, but she was at McDonald's. And I wanted to show you guys that we eat like this every day in our family. Like, even though we're both working parents and we have kids who are in school and we have family obligations and cultural obligations, we are very involved in our communities. We have a huge garden every year. We're very busy people, but we incorporate medicine into our food every day. And we really try to practice what we preach. And so that's the reason why I wanted to show you all that, because medicine soup and medicine meals are a part of our lives every day. So when we make medicine soup, we think of it in 3 layers, and it's basically 3 opportunities for you to put good herbs and medicine into your food. So for example, that first layer, it all starts with the broth. And this is similar to what you guys are all, what Tess has available for you all there today. Now, if you've never made bone broth, this is a basic recipe for bone broth. I can email this to you. Tess will have this PowerPoint available. So if anybody wants to have a copy of this PowerPoint, all you have to do is contact Tess and she can get it to you. She can email it out. But if you want this recipe, you can take a picture of the screen, whatever you want. But really, you know, I know that some of you guys are probably looking at that like, my grandma or my mom made that every week when I was growing up. Bone broth is just the soup that your grandma made. You know, we don't think of it that way because bone broth has become this real like catchphrase, you know? And when you go to the store these days, there's like 20, like take Walmart, for example. When you go to Walmart, there's 20 different kinds of bone broth there now. Sodium, ones with sodium, ones that are sodium free, ones that are organic and not organic. There's chicken and beef and vegetable bone broth. I don't know how they can have vegetarian bone broth, but that's what they call it. But, you know, this is really just the broth that you grew up with if you had someone who cooked in your home. During the holidays, people who make a turkey, you know, back in the day, and even sometimes these days in our house, we'll take that turkey carcass and we'll throw it into a huge kettle of water with a bunch of herbs and a bunch of, you know, the herbs and water that and a little bit of fat and a little bit of vinegar to help break the bones down and increase the calcium level of the broth. And we'll let that turkey carcass boil for like 12 hours, like on a very low simmer. And we make turkey bone broth. You know, if you have a chicken that you made, don't throw the bones away, just boil them down and make bone broth. We actually have a bag in our freezer. I could even go get it for you guys right now, but we keep a 1 gallon bag in our freezer. And like, if we have T-bones, although no one can afford T-bones these days, but if we have steak or pork chops or whatever that has the bone in, we actually cut around those bones, put them in the freezer bag. If we cut an onion, we take the leftover parts of the onion, including the peel, and put them in that bag in the freezer. The tops of the celery, we put it in the bag. You know, everything that can go into bone broth, we keep in a bag in our freezer. And then when we're ready to make the broth, we just dump it all in the water and boil it for a long time. And then we always add a little bit of salt and a little bit of apple cider vinegar. Again, the vinegar will break the bones down and increase the calcium level of the broth. Okay. And you can put anything in here that you have laying around. You can use any bones. We always try to add a little bit of fat to ours. And it can be any kind of fat, whether it's plant-based or not plant-based. Fat isn't the enemy of health, right? It's a lack of activity. So good broth is the basis of our medicine soup. And we take, you know, we take this opportunity to add a lot of medicines in. We think of things like bay leaves and black pepper and onion and garlic as food, don't we? But the fact is, all of these are amazing medicine. Bay leaves are fantastic for your immune system, and they're great for your lungs. If you're someone who has asthma like I do, bay leaves are fantastic for strengthening your lungs, you know, and all of these others. I'll get into them more. Another example of a bone broth that we've made, that's my husband's hand in the picture. This is a bone broth we made on White Earth a while back. And these are just some of the medicines that we put into that bone broth. So there's those buffalo bones in there, but you can see all of that beautiful medicine. Calendula is a really common plant that's related to marigolds. You know, the marigolds that you always have in your flower gardens. Did you guys know that those are actually medicinal as well? Calendula is a type of marigold, and the petals are delicious. They're kind of savory tasting, and they're a wonderful addition to soups because they're so good for your circulation and your joints. So if you're someone who's been told that, you have some joints rubbing together, maybe you have arthritis, calendula is an awesome flower that you can grow easily in your garden up there. And it's beautiful, but you can also incorporate it into so many of your meals. Bear root is, you might have heard of it. Some people call it OSHA, OSHA root. And bear root or OSHA root is a member of the celery family. It kind of tastes like celery, but again, it's fantastic for the lungs, but it's also great for sinus health. So if you're someone who's very prone to sinus infections, incorporating bear root into your soups is wonderful. I want to also point out the mushroom powder. Do you guys see that mushroom powder there? The reason I want to point that out is because my husband, my husband and our youngest son, we have 3 sons, and our youngest son hates mushrooms, as well as my husband. My husband is the only person alive I've ever seen who was given a bowl of noodles that have like canned cream of mushroom soup on them, and he'll eat the cream of mushroom soup, but he's the only person I've ever met who can actually pick out the tiny pieces of mushroom from the cream of mushroom soup. I have no idea how he does it or sees them even, but he does it. That's how much he dislikes mushrooms. But when we get mushrooms, when we harvest them, things like chaga, which grows all over up there where you guys are at, or morel mushrooms. Up there, you have a mushroom called lion's mane. You have turkey tail. You have reishi mushroom. All of those are amazing medicinal mushrooms. And some people don't like the taste or the texture of them. So what we'll do is dry them, and then we put them in a blender or food processor and turn them into a powder. And even my ultra picky husband cannot taste the mushrooms in anything as long as they're powdered first. They add a little bit, if you put a lot in there, they add a little bit of like an umami or savory flavor to what you're cooking, but you won't be able to tell that they're mushrooms, but you'll still get all the medicinal benefit from them. So mushroom powders are great. And I was telling Tess that, if you are someone who doesn't go out and collect all your wild mushrooms, that's totally fine. There's actually a really amazing brand. I always hate like advertising for companies, but I also really want you all to have access to all of these beautiful medicines. So there's a brand called OM, O-M, and they make a blend called Master Blend. So it's OM Master Blend, and it's a blend of 5 mushrooms, turkey tail, reishi, lion's mane, chaga, and I think maitake. And it also has turmeric in there. So turmeric and I think one other herb. And it's an amazing blend, and it's not all that expensive. You can mix it in with your coffee in the morning. Yes, I said with your coffee. You won't even know it's in there, I promise. Or you can just put it in your soup, put it on top of your eggs in the morning, whatever, however you use it. Incorporating mushrooms into your life is really, really important. I'll talk more about that. But this is a sample bone broth that we make. So some of the herbs that you can put into your bone broth are ones that you always put into your soup. These are all herbs that we know, that we think of all the time as being like culinary herbs, things that we grow in our garden, things that we can get at the grocery store very easily. But did you guys know that all of these, thyme, rosemary, bay leaves, oregano, marjoram, all of these are super antiviral. So if you're concerned about like the latest cough or cold that's going around, or if you're concerned about COVID, which is still going around, if you're worried about any viral illness, you can incorporate all of these into your life every day. They're super safe. They won't conflict with any of your prescription medications, and they're delicious, right? And we don't think of these as being medicines, but they all are. And actually, originally, back in the day, before we started using them in all of our food, they were already considered medicine. Rosemary in particular is so good for your lungs. Like I said, I know tons about lung health because of my own experiences with asthma. Bay leaves, like I was saying, is also, really good for your health and a wonderful antiviral. Oregano is really great for sore throats and things like strep. Oregano oil, of course, a lot of you all might know, is antibacterial. So if you're someone who's prone to infection, if you're someone who's had cellulitis before, which is like a skin infection or an infection just under your skin, incorporating oregano into your life is one way to help keep those bacteria at bay. Okay, so all wonderful herbs to incorporate. And a lot of these are actually in the blend that Tess put together for you all. This is a slightly different flavor profile. How many of you guys have ever tried the Vietnamese soup called pho or pho, P-H-O? You guys ever seen that anywhere? There's a few pho restaurants in Duluth, if you ever get down there, and it is a delicious medicinal soup. It has noodles in there. And if you've ever wondered what the flavors are in that broth, these are some of the flavors. And we don't normally think of cinnamon as a medicine, right? But cinnamon is antibacterial and antiviral. For my friends in there who might be diabetic or pre-diabetic, one of the most commonly used herbs to help balance blood sugar and to help with pancreas function, right? Your pancreas is what regulates the release of insulin in the body. But if you're diabetic or pre-diabetic and you need a little help, cinnamon is amazing. And, cinnamon is delicious too. In our family, to make an excuse for when we eat pumpkin pie, we call it medicine pie because it has all of these beautiful medicines in it, like ginger and clove and cinnamon. They are all medicine. But if you're interested, I just wanted to show you all here. Can you all see me? Am I up there? But so this in this jar here is honey and cinnamon mixed together. That's all this is. And I make this I make a big jar of this, but I hand these out to elders in my community. If you all wanted something great to hand out to elders in your community, you can hand out a mixture of honey and cinnamon. It's so simple and so easy to do, but all our elders have to do, and my uncle in particular, who's diabetic, is he takes a spoonful of it every morning and he mixes it in hot water and drinks it as tea. You don't have to filter it out. Having the little pieces of cinnamon floating around in there is fine. But I can't tell you all how much that has really helped to regulate his blood sugar. And you might be thinking, oh my gosh, honey, isn't that bad for diabetics? But if you ask most people who work with diabetics, most physicians even, they'll tell you that the medicinal benefits of a little bit of honey, I'm not talking about a lot, I'm talking about a little bit of honey every day, has so many medicinal benefits that it's worth the slight rise in blood sugar. Honey does not make your blood sugar spike as much as white sugar. So, having the medicinal benefits of the honey with the cinnamon is worth it for most people. And very easy that way to incorporate into your diet. But we do this trick with everything. We even make mushroom honey for elders who need to incorporate more mushrooms into their diet. All they have to do is take a spoonful of it a day, and all they taste are the mushrooms. Is the honey. So I'll talk more about mushrooms in a little bit. Do you see the star-shaped pod there? The second one, the star-shaped pod. So that's star anise or star anise. And star anise is an amazing herb that's used a lot over in India and Asia. There are relatives of that are native to North America. But if any of you have ever taken or used Tamiflu, T-A-M-I flu. Tamiflu is that medicine that's, I believe now it's sold over the counter, like next to the Tylenol and all of that. But it's a medicine that you, like, if you get a viral illness, you stick it up your nose. If you might remember back during the swine flu scare, back in the early 2000s, everyone was worried because there was a shortage of Tamiflu. Well, the active ingredient in Tamiflu comes from star anise, the star anise pods. So that's actually a plant-based medicine. They've done a lot of other things to Tamiflu that aren't necessarily good for you. I would much rather use the herb if I can. And so if you put like some star anise and some cinnamon into a tea, maybe add a little bit of honey in there, maybe add some ginger, a little bit of clove, you can actually drink that as a tea every day during flu season to keep yourself healthy. They're powerfully antiviral. And then those green pods on the bottom are cardamom. Cardamom is delicious, but again, it's also really medicinal. All of these herbs up here boost your immune system as well. So they help you fight off colds. They help you fight off infections. So if you're someone who's very prone to pneumonia, which is a lung infection, all of these herbs can really help keep them at bay. And they're very easy to incorporate into your diet, okay? And very safe. Just some more awesome herbs that we love to put into our broths, into our soups. You know, parsley, we think of parsley as not as a medicine, but as a food, right? But actually parsley is really good for your digestive system. If you're someone who, that's why they used to put the little piece of parsley on the plate. You guys remember when they used to do that? They've kind of stopped doing that now, except at, you know, a couple of little cafes. But the reason they used to do that is not necessarily like for fresh breath. They put parsley on the plate because after you eat your meal, you chew on the parsley because it helps with your digestion. And it is wonderful for that. Chilies, if any of you like spicy food, they've found that people who eat spicy food, like with chili peppers in them every day, actually tend to have much lower blood pressure than people who don't. And that's because spicy chilies are amazing for your heart, for your blood pressure in general, and especially help with the flow of blood. So if you're someone who's prone to clotting, or if you're someone who's prone to plaque in your arteries, chilies are something, hot chilies are something that's great to incorporate into your diet. Even hot sauce, right? I remember I had this physician who always recommended to his patients who had congestion, whether it was in the lungs or in the sinuses, he always recommended that they go home and take half a teaspoon of Tabasco sauce. Like that was his thing that he was always recommending. He was like, there's no reason for me to give you a prescription. It's not really going to help you as much. Go home and take half a teaspoon of Tabasco. And you know, what happens? What happens when you eat Tabasco or a hot sauce kind of straight? Have you ever noticed your eyes start to water and your nose starts to run? That's because chilies and even onions, as you probably know, if you've ever cut an onion, those things actually help to thin up mucus. So, sorry, I know some of you are eating still, so you don't want to hear the word mucus. I apologize. But you know, those herbs help to thin that up so that you can get it out, cough it out more easily, or blow it out of your nose more easily. Okay. And all of these other, you know, or the Mexican oregano, coriander, which is just the seed of cilantro. All of these are also medicinal. That's just black peppercorns there. You know, black pepper lowers your blood pressure. You know, it's very good. Black pepper is wonderful for liver and kidney function as well. Right. So these are all medicines. And here we've been eating it this whole time, not knowing it. So here we are with the mushrooms. These are just a few of my favorites. And again, if you don't like mushrooms, mushroom powder is the way to go. As I was saying earlier, we will often mix mushroom powder with honey and give that to elders because it's just an easy way for them to incorporate mushrooms into their everyday lives. Now, why would we want you guys to do that? Why is it important to have mushrooms as part of your everyday diet? Mushrooms are what we call neuroprotective. If you're worried about Alzheimer's, if you're worried about dementia, if you are worried about memory loss, mushrooms actually help to protect brain tissues. They're amazing. And there's tons of literature to back that up for any of my friends who need that. These mushrooms are amazing. I also, when I am working with people who are in recovery, whether that's from substance abuse or recovery from a long-term illness, I always make sure to give people mushroom powder because it's so good for boosting the immune system, having healthy lungs. These mushrooms are amazing for the heart. You know, they're just all around really good for you. But what I really love to use them for are people who are in recovery from substance abuse in particular, and people who are trying to protect their brain tissues. Okay. And they're, you know, people who are trying to reverse the effects of damage to the brain. I work with a lot of people who have a TBI, a traumatic brain injury, and I always put a mushroom blend together for them, or I recommend that mushroom blend for them. Okay. Any questions right now before I move on? Okay.
I have one really quick one. Can you hear me?
Oh, yep, I can hear you.
What about chaga tea? Does that work the same?
So, okay, great question. So here's the thing. Yes, it works. But my longer answer to that is over time of doing this now for decades and working with people for decades, I have found that it is often much better to actually take these plants and mushrooms into your body. When we make tea, we're used to the tea bag that we put into the hot water and we let it infuse, and then we take the actual plants out and we drink the tea, right? But really with a lot of plants, like dandelion, like nettles, and like these mushrooms and chaga in particular, it's very important to get them into our bodies. We get many more medicinal compounds because frankly, not like all the medicinal compounds that are in chaga, and there are like 750 medicinal compounds just in chaga. And not all of them are water soluble. Okay. So it is really nice to actually take the powdered mushroom into your body. And if you don't have powdered chaga, it's not really hard to powder it. You just have to crush it up pretty finely. And then you can put it into like a Ninja blender or a Vitamix if you have one, things like that. And you can powder it that way. But I really, you know, now I would rather you drink the tea than not get it at all, because at least you're going to get some of those medicinal compounds. But if you can, I always recommend actually taking the powder into your body. So I hope that answers your question.
Miigwech, thank you.
Linda?
Oh, yes. Sorry, did you mute?
I use a microplane to get my chaga into a powder. So it's really easy. You can just, you know, grind a little bit off at the time, a microplane instead of a grater, a box grater. It's a sharp blade. And that works really good to just do it over the teacup or whatever.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And the fact is when it's like chaga actually has a really good flavor to it, in my opinion. Like, have you guys ever really tasted chaga? It like has notes of coffee and chocolate. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm kind of a super taster, and I really try to look at like what the background flavors of things. And so like if you wanted to take some chaga and you know, put it, like Tess was saying, on the microplane and put it into your brownies, you know, like if you're making brownies or chocolate chip cookies or something like that, that doesn't really have a lot of medicinal value, you know, like let's say you're baking something, why not add a little bit of that in there? No one will ever know it was in there. but you're incorporating that medicine into your diet. Like it's kind of like when we eat ramen noodles in my family. We do sometimes, but we only put like a little bit of the seasoning packet in because it's so high in sodium and there's even preservatives in there. And we put the rest with our own homemade bone broth, you know? So like we're able to eat ramen noodles and still at least have that intention of having good medicine in there, you know? So if it's that easy using a microplane to powder your mushrooms, you might as well use it in everything you can. So that was the first layer. That's just all the stuff we put into our broth. And now we, again, like I was saying, we think of these medicine soups as being in layers. And the second layer is the stuff that you're actually eating, like that you're chewing. And that's the stuff that gives your soup bite. And, we put onions and garlic into our broth, but we also cut or chop them up and put them into our soups. And I know a lot of you all probably go out. It's getting to be almost time to go out and get the gigagouange that's sitting up here. Those, some people call them ramps. Some people call them wild onions. Some people call them wild leeks. You guys are really lucky to have some really good, beautiful wild onions up there, these gigagouange. Where we live, we actually have these. They're much, much smaller here on the Great Plains. They're much smaller, and much more pungent, like much more strong onion flavor to them. But if you don't go out and forage wild onions, it's fine to use the stuff that you get in the grocery store, any of your bulb onions, your leeks, shallots, store-bought garlic. That's totally fine. They still have beautiful medicine. If any of you are concerned about fatty liver disease, I have a friend who has never drank a drop of alcohol in her life. I'm not kidding. She's in her 50s, never has drank alcohol, but she was recently diagnosed with fatty liver. And she just couldn't believe it because she's, tried her whole life to be healthy through exercise. Okay. So she runs every day and she can run miles in her 50s. Like I've always been super impressed. And she's very physically healthy. She looks very physically healthy, right? She looks like she's in great shape. But what does she eat? She eats Burger King. Like that's her favorite thing to eat. She will eat Burger King almost every day, but then she'll go and run it off. Well, the problem is that Burger King, there are things in that food, like for instance, French fries from a fast food restaurant have things in them that are really, really bad for our health. Beyond the fat, right? There are things in, for instance, the potatoes that are used in fast food restaurants. Tess has heard me talk about this many times, but I have a dear friend who's actually a potato farmer, and he grows potatoes specifically for the McDonald's Corporation. So McDonald's has their own potato, right? And he grows McDonald's potatoes to make McDonald's French fries. And when he goes out, I have pictures of him. When he goes out into his potato fields, he wears like basically what looks like a hazmat suit because he sprays so much stuff on his potatoes that he doesn't like to breathe the air around them. He said it irritates his lungs. And so he has told me many times, he's like, do not eat these potatoes, the stuff that I grow. Right. And so when him and his family eats potatoes, they go to the local co-op and buy organic potatoes. Right. So the reason I'm saying that is because, there's a lot of stuff in fast food. And like going back to my friend who looks to be in excellent physical shape and is a great runner, she ended up having a heart attack and having a lot of health issues because of her diet, because of what she eats, affecting her beyond just her weight. Right. And so what she started to do, she completely changed her diet after having a heart attack. And she started to incorporate a lot more. She also was diagnosed with fatty liver disease. and she started to incorporate a lot more onions and garlic into her diet every day. And she went in and her liver health and function has improved 20-fold. Like, it's just amazing. In a very short period of time, like in a month, her doctor was like, what are you doing? And she said, I completely cut out fast food and I started to eat like garlic every day. She's always worried about like stinking like garlic because she will eat like almost half a bulb of garlic a day. Now, I'm not saying any of you guys have to eat half a bulb a day. I'm just saying that like incorporating a lot more into your diet is really going to help with your liver health and function, and kidneys as well. You know, garlic is one of the most commonly used herbs to fight fatty liver disease and cirrhosis. Okay. So that's just one thing. We also put a lot of greens into our soups, and you can put lots, like there's really good medicine. I know you've probably all, I'm preaching to the choir here because I know you've all probably heard about the benefits of leafy green vegetables, right? They're great for your iron. They're great for your stomach. They're great for your gut microbiome. Leafy greens are full of fiber that's great for your digestion. If you have IBS or any sort of irritable bowel syndrome or Crohn's disease, leafy greens are wonderful for you. And sometimes it's hard to incorporate them into our diet, right? We incorporate a lot of wild greens, like in the middle there, in Ojibwe, that's called mazan or mazanig. That's nettles, stinging nettles, and they do sting. But with any cooking, all the stinging effect goes away. They're super high in protein, super high in fiber, and super high in phytonutrients that are wonderful for your health. And one more word about the nettles here. Oh, by the way, Tess has some nettle mint tea in there. And if you have arthritis, I want you to go get a cup of that right now because nettles are like one of the most amazing herbs for arthritis in particular. Nettles are fantastically anti-inflammatory. So arthritis causes inflammation. That's basically swelling. Inflammation is actually the cause of a lot of terrible illnesses. Inflammation of the lungs is asthma. Inflammation of joint tissues is arthritis. Inflammation of brain tissues often causes anxiety and depression. Inflammation is of sinuses and things like that, and eyes, inflammation of the tissues around the eyes, that's allergies, right? Allergy induced. And the anti-inflammatory properties of nettles are great for all of those. So if you are someone who has had surgery and you still have swelling from the surgery, I have a student at United Tribes who had surgery on her knee last month, and her knee was still so swollen it looked like there was a grapefruit sitting on top of her knee. That's how swollen it was. I gave her nettle tea. She drank it for 3 days. All the swelling was gone by the 3rd day. And even her, like, again, her doctor was amazed. So, nettles are a great anti-inflammatory. You can eat them or you can use them in tea. Powerful anti-inflammatory. Okay. On the right, we have milkweed. A lot of people don't know that milkweed is edible. It's the stuff that you plant for your monarch butterflies. Milkweed is totally edible. We've been eating it all of our lives. Many tribes do. I actually read an account. Some of you might have seen that book, a really old book, I think from the 1930s by H.H. Smith, and it's Ethnobotany of the Ojibwe Indians. That book, in there, he talks about how when he was visiting the Ojibwe, one of their primary food sources was milkweed. Milkweed and acorns were 2 things that were listed in that H.H. Smith book as being primary food sources for the Ojibwe. But how many of us still eat milkweed today? Like, there's probably a couple people who do in there, but I don't know many people who do, right? But it is a delicious food. And it's wonderful. You can freeze it. We freeze it all the time. We dry it. The little flower buds here that are in this picture on the right, they taste almost like green peas. They taste like a cross between green peas and broccoli to me, but broccoli without the funkiness. I love broccoli, but it does have a little bit of a funkiness to it that some people don't like. So if you don't like broccoli, milkweed is the next vegetable, the next great vegetable. And I wanted to show you all that we eat greens even in the wintertime, and that's hard to do, right? Because it's hard to acquire fresh greens in the middle of the winter. So instead we dry them. So like at the end of the season, how many of you guys have a garden? And at the end of the season, you have like big, huge kale plants. You can't eat all that kale at one time. And so you have these kale plants just left over in your garden and you just let them freeze and die. If you're one of those people, like I used to be, we harvest all of our kale and we just dry it. You can put it in a dehydrator. You can set it out on paper towels on your kitchen table and just let it dry until it's crunchy. And then during the winter months, we take a handful out of this jar. We actually, it's almost empty now because we're getting to be toward growing season again. But we always fill this jar every year. And every time we make soup, we take a handful of it out and put it into our soup. And we have greens in there. When we make spaghetti sauce, we take a handful of the greens and put them in there. Our kids don't even know that they're in there, you know? Anytime we make anything, that's actually a combination of cabbage, kale, and I think collard greens from our garden. Of course, beans. We all know beans are very high in protein, but beans are very, very good for your heart as well. And these are just some of the varieties that we use that are some of our favorites. We use wild beans and cultivated. Beans are very important for heart health. And, you know, especially if you're someone who doesn't eat a lot of meat, you can, you know, beans are wonderful, a wonderful protein source. Okay. Squash. We think of squash only as food, but, and I'm not even kidding. There are some countries where squash is part of a prescription for people because they are so wonderful for your digestive health. They're wonderful for your heart. And they're even really good if you suffer from like arthritis, like we were talking about earlier, or joint inflammation. There are really wonderful anti-inflammatory properties in squashes as well. And that's winter squash, summer squash, both. We eat a lot of them fresh, but where we live, and I don't know if it's like this where you all live, but we can hardly keep squash all winter because even our winter squashes with the really hard, thick skin, even they'll start to mold after a while. So we love to dry our winter and summer squashes. This is zucchini up here and yellow squash, just like down here. We just slice them and dry them. We make zucchini chips to eat instead of potato chips. But we also put our zucchini and yellow squash into soups and stews in the wintertime, dried. And then, pro tip here, if you're someone who's trying to cut down on carbs, we actually take our dried zucchini and dried yellow squash and put them into our Vitamix and powder them. And then we mix that 1-to-1 with our flour. Like if we're making bread, or if you're making fry bread, or if you're making any kind of bread, you can put zucchini flour in there. And it's almost zero carbs and you can't even tell the difference. So it's, you know, a really great tip to know that you can make flour out of that. Plus it stretches your flour way longer, and you can use all those super huge old zucchinis that are too like foamy to eat, you know, those squishy zucchinis that get to be like way too big. You can use those to make flour, zucchini flour. Also, I want us to start rethinking potatoes. Okay. Potatoes are great and they're indigenous. I mean, we eat potatoes in my house, but number one, we always buy organic potatoes, especially since my friend who's the potato farmer got on us. We only buy organic potatoes. But white potatoes, white fleshed potatoes, it doesn't matter what color the skin of the potato is, white fleshed potatoes are very high glycemic index. They're terrible for diabetics. White potatoes have been bred to be very high in starch. So if you're going to buy potatoes, fine, but try the purple potatoes that are now in all the stores. Try the golden flesh potatoes, try sweet potatoes. Those are all lower glycemic index than white flesh potatoes. But even more than that, try some of your indigenous grains and tubers, like wild rice. Wild rice in soups is amazing and delicious and much, much healthier for you than potatoes. But really think beyond that. Different kinds of corn. There's all sorts of beautiful Ojibwe corn, like the Bear Island flint corn and things like that. So good in soup and so much better for you than yellow sweet corn or potatoes. Amaranth is another grain that's really good. Beets. My kids said they're not big fans of beets. And I think it's because I made the mistake of first introducing them to pickled beets. And that was a big mistake. I should not have done that. I see you, Tess. But I made the mistake of introducing them to pickled beets, and I should not have done that because it ruined them on beets. But you can actually take beets and put them in soup, and people think they're potatoes, but they're much lower glycemic index, but they still have a very similar potato-like texture, okay? Plantains, this is a native tuber that we eat a lot down here that actually does grow up toward Duluth, and it's called prairie turnip. And then finally, the third layer of our soup, we always put toppings on our soup. Like I can't imagine eating a bowl of chili without putting some jalapeno and cilantro on there. But jalapeno and cilantro on your chili is just one more opportunity to put medicine into your chili, right? If you're going to be eating chili, which already has tons of good medicine in it from the tomatoes and the beans and things like that, why not put onions and garlic and mushroom powder in your chili? Okay, bear with me, and then put some really good medicine on top of it. We put all kinds of chilies on top of our soups. We put all kinds of sprouts and flowers on top of our soups. Our kids, it's so weird because I remember when our 7-year-old went to a restaurant and got a bowl of soup for the first time. He was like, how come I can see the soup? And it's because in our house, we put so much stuff on top of his soups that he can't see the soup, and he didn't know that was a thing. So what we do a lot in our family is anytime we make soups or anytime we make rice bowls, anytime we make tacos, anytime we make, even Indian tacos, right? Anytime we make anything like that in our family, we put a minimum of 6 toppings out, and we tell our kids that they have to choose 3, no matter what. You have to choose 3, you have to put these on there. And we've been doing that with our kids their entire lives. And so now we have a 7-year-old who doesn't question it. He eats onions, he eats kimchi, he uses hot sauce places, he'll eat fresh radishes from the garden. He thinks that chips are kale chips, So, but it's because we've been doing this their entire lives, right? So when you make soup, think of it as an opportunity to put medicine into your life 3 times, in the broth, in the soup itself, and then on top. And you'll be getting great medicinal benefits from all of these. Okay. So I'm going to stop my share here and ask if there are any questions. No questions. Did they all get asked during the talk?
Hi, Linda. I have a question.
Hi.
It's from way back at the cinnamon time. Does it matter what kind of cinnamon you use? Because it seems like there's so many when I'm checking them out.
It does not matter what kind of cinnamon you use. I know what you're talking about. So there are two. Cinnamon has become one of those things that's really bougie, and I blame Cinnabon. You know, the Cinnabon place. They use a type of imported cinnamon that is really delicious, but it's also very expensive. And so I always say just use whatever cinnamon that you can get your hands on. I always try to prefer cinnamon that isn't, you know, when it comes to cinnamon, you don't necessarily get what you pay for. I know that sounds crazy, but like even the cheap cinnamon in like the mass produced, like, I don't know what kind, like at Walmart, they have the Great Value brand. It's the same stuff. There's no fillers in the cinnamon. You just have to look at the label and make sure it says 100% cinnamon or 100% whatever you're buying. Did you all know that if you buy the cheap little honey bears that with honey, and like if it's shaped like a bear and it's $1, that it's almost always honey mixed with corn syrup? You know, so they'll find ways to fool you. So make sure that you're looking at labels and that it says 100% of whatever you're buying, including cinnamon. So great question. Any other questions?
Linda, we had one about teas and their diuretic properties. Some people have to be careful about diuretics.
Yeah. So most of what we talked about today, you don't really have to worry about that. One of the most powerful diuretic plants around is dandelion. Like, I don't know how many of you all came in from Canada or you are a Canadian citizen, but up until in my lifetime, dandelion was only available by prescription in Canada. And that's because it's a powerful diuretic. And so if that's something that you know, if you're on a water pill, and that's something you have to be careful of, be careful with the amount of dandelion that you're using. But most of the herbs that we talked about today are not powerful diuretics. And, you know, if you ever have any questions about that or concerns, feel free to send me a message. I'm available on Facebook, or I have Instagram too.
I have a quick question. Are any of the things that you suggested, would they be contraindicated with like a blood thinner, like having too much of the greens for the vitamin K? Would you like to, is there anything like that to mention?
So that's a great question. So none of what I mentioned today is contraindicated for people who are on blood thinners. But if you are someone who's been told that you need to be careful how much how many leafy greens you're using, then of course you should always follow those directions. But you know, they're not going to be more, like nothing that I talked about today is going to be more dangerous than any of the things you've already been warned against, if you've been warned against that. Yeah. So if you haven't been told to avoid leafy greens because of the high vitamin K, then you wouldn't have to worry about anything that I've talked about. And I do that very intentionally when it comes to a lot of these herbs and a lot of these things to eat, because it is something, you know, I mean, like spinach. Let's take spinach, for example, right? Everyone's been told, I hate the word superfood. I despise it because I don't believe that there's any such thing as a superfood, right? We should all have balanced diets, but spinach, it has been touted as a superfood for a long time. It is very high in oxalates. You know, so anybody here been told that they need to avoid oxalates? You know, because that can actually harm your kidneys, for example, right? Your kidney filters. But only if you're sensitive. So, but you don't see a warning label on the spinach in the grocery store, right? But if you are sensitive to that, you probably know it. Any other questions?
I've got a question.
Yes.
Now that we're going to be greening up pretty soon, is there anything off the top of your head that looked like a spring tonic that, you know, would be hunted and gathered for the first thing in the spring that you can kind of recommend?
Absolutely. The best spring tonic and the one that's used worldwide, right? What's the first spring vegetable that's eaten in Europe and Asia? It's nettles, stinging nettles. And it is an amazing spring tonic. Not only does it help to flush the system, it's not diuretic like dandelion, but it does help to flush the system, and it helps to put nutrients back into your body.
Also rhubarb.
Yeah, rhubarb is another good one. It'll be, well, at least where we live, it'll be a little longer. But what about the plant that some people call wild rhubarb or burdock? That's another plant that within the next couple weeks up there, as long as the temperatures are above like 40 and the ground starts to thaw, the burdock's going to be this big, but the root will still be this long, right? It's like a perennial taproot. Are you guys familiar with burdock? It has those huge leaves that almost look like a dinosaur plant. That's a wonderful spring tonic plant as well, and it doesn't sting. So if you're worried about the sting of the stinging nettles, burdock is a great one for a spring tonic as well. And another one that I'll talk about. So my mom is half Korean and half Mongolian. And so I was raised with a spring tonic soup that I actually have every year. And in there we use mugwort. You guys like sage, you know, the sage that is harvested and used, burn it for smudging. You guys might have had some in there today. But it's a relative of that sage. We actually put it into soup in the spring as a tonic. And so sage tea is another good spring tonic. But when I say spring, I mean, like, you know, it'll be up in mid to late May.
Oh, I have a quick question. What are like 3 things you can start with right away if you don't kind of eat like this already? What would you recommend? Like 3 power things that we could eat?
Great question. So do you like wild or store-bought? Or both? So let's
Could be both.
okay. So let's talk about store-bought first. Okay. So if you, because I know, I understand, I used to be like super militant, like, and I even used to use the word eliminate a lot. Eliminate white sugar from your diet, eliminate white flour from your diet, eliminate this and that. I like when I was younger and like super like, you know, passionate about this, and I'm more passionate about it now, but I used to be like, oh God, we have to get this stuff out of our diet. No more white sugar, you know? But as I've gotten older, I'm like, oh my gosh, I really want a brownie, you know? So it's like, you know, I think we need to be gentle with ourselves. So I know that like, it's hard to just go cold turkey and start eating like this tomorrow, right? So if you are looking to like just incorporate a few things into your diet, like that's the word I use a lot more now, is just incorporate, add stuff to your diet. So I highly, highly recommend leafy greens of any kind, but in particular in the store, I know it sounds trite because you've all heard of it, but kale. Kale is so easy to incorporate into your life. You can put it in a salad, you can put it in soup, you can chop it up really fine, you can put it in a smoothie. So if I talk about 3 easy things from the store, kale is going to be one of them. The other one is to, and this is more of an exchange, okay? Another one, a very simple exchange that you can make that's going to make a big difference in your diet is, as I was saying earlier, the potatoes. Instead of the next time you go into the grocery store and you see your selection of potatoes there, choose the potatoes that have a colored flesh. So like the purple potatoes, the orange potatoes, which are sweet, even the gold potatoes are going to be better for you. And try as hard as you can to choose the organic ones. That's just one simple thing that you can do. Another simple exchange that you can make in the store. Oh, I'm going to tell you 2. I'm sorry. I know some of you might even have to go, but just give me 1 second. So is the differences in corn. please, please try to avoid eating that white and yellow sweet corn. If I love corn on the cob, don't get me wrong. I can down like 4 elotes at a time. I'm not even kidding. but the thing is I know myself, so I'll let myself have one. And then every other time, like all the corn we eat in our home, you guys can see like this shelf behind us. You know, we have another pantry full because this is the stuff we grow, we trade for, we harvest. And so we eat only Indian corn at home, only. Exclusively. That's a very simple thing you can do because so many people are growing multicolored corn now, indigenous varieties of corn. They are so much lower glycemic index. They are so much better for you. They tend to not be GMO. And so, you know, incorporating a leafy green like kale, making the switch from white potatoes to colored flesh potatoes, and making the switch from sweet corn to indigenous corn. Super duper easy things you can do that are going to make a huge difference in your diet and your kids' diet. And then the last thing I want to say is I understand, like, I bet every person in this room pretty much uses white flour in some way, right? Makes bread, makes, you know, something with white flour, uses it to thicken gravy, whatever. Even if you do use white flour, I'm not asking you to give that up, although there are exchanges you can make. These days, there's almond flour and coconut flour and things like that. But please don't ever buy bleached flour. Don't ever buy bleached flour. Bleached flour is literally what it sounds like. They use a bleaching agent to make it more white. And there's no reason for it. There's no reason to bleach flour other than an obsession with whiteness. There's no reason to bleach flour. I really made you laugh. But there's just no reason to do it. And it's terrible for our health and it's terrible for the environment. So one simple thing you can do for yourself and your family and the environment is to never buy bleached flour and only buy unbleached flour. It's a very simple thing. You know, if you're still going to eat flour, at least don't buy the bleached stuff. Dandelions are like one of the easiest things to recognize. Everyone in this room probably knows what a dandelion looks like. The entire dandelion is edible. And here's a big tip. There's no poisonous lookalike for a dandelion. So if you're scared of foraging and you're first starting out, dandelions are awesome because if it looks like a dandelion, it's not poisonous. So you don't have to worry about like mistaking it for one of its cousins. Right? So dandelion, amazing for the heart, amazing for the lungs, amazing for the liver, amazing for your digestive system, tons of medicine, easy to recognize, and the whole thing is edible and medicinal. So if you're going to start off foraging and using wild plants, I really recommend dandelion as the first thing you start off with. Any other questions, comments? Thank you all so much for coming. It's been super fun to be with you guys. Oh, thank you. I hope I'll see you guys tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll be talking about brain health and gut health. So we'll talk about a little more about mushrooms and stuff in depth. So
Thank you, my dear. We'll talk to you later.
anytime. Thanks, Tess. I'll talk to you later.